And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas, gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's June the 1st, 152nd day of the year. Only 213 days remain to the year's over with. It's the official start of the summer season, recognized globally as International Children's Day. A number of historical milestones took place on June 1st. 1980, Cable News Network made its debut as the first 24-hour television news channel. Started by Ted Turner, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sure he'd be sad to see what it's become. 2001, Crown Prince Dipendra of Nepal fatally shot 9 members of the royal family, including his parents, before he shot himself. And the 2009 General Motors filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Well, they're still with us. It's Global Day of Parents. I guess you'd call them quirky holidays, including National Go Barefoot Day, National Olive Day, National Nail Polish Day. Well, on that note, let us see what stories we have in the news, because there's always something going on. Yeah. U.S. military attacks Iran in what's called self-defense strikes over the weekend. Well, U.S. Central Command announced that it carried out self-defense strikes against Iran. Conducted attacks on Iranian radar and command and control sites for drones in Goruk, Iran, and Kishim Island this weekend. These measured and deliberate strikes occurred on Saturday and Sunday in response to aggressive Iranian actions that included the shoot down of a USMQ-1 drone that was operating over international waters. U.S. fighter aircraft quickly responded by eliminating Iranian air defenses, a ground control station, and 2 one-way attack drones that pose clear threats to ships transiting regional waters. Iran is determined they're not going to throw in the towel. Well, a man warned co-workers nobody's going home today. Got a prison term in a fatal shooting. Took place in Minnesota. He made that statement to his co-workers, nobody's going home today, before a deadly workplace confrontation took place. He was sentenced to more than 10 years in prison for fatally shooting a fellow employee. Mohammed Hared, 26, was sentenced Thursday to 128 months in prison after pleading guilty to second-degree unintentional murder while committing a felony in the death of 22-year-old Ahmed Ibrahim Karaf, according to the Dakota County Attorney's Office. Shooting happened June 29, 2024, parking lot of an Amazon fulfillment center in Lakeville, Minnesota. Arad Karaf and another co-worker had carpooled together for an overnight shift. According to the criminal complaint, the dispute began during an overnight work break after Harad discovered a flashlight attachment was missing from his handgun, which had been left inside the vehicle the man used to carpool to work. I don't know that attachment was ever found, but eventually he wound up shooting one of his co-workers. Well, Hassan Piker says UK has barred him, trashes unbelievable power of pro-Israel groups. Frankly, it hadn't been a great few days for the Marxist political influencer Hassan Piker. First, as Fox News reported exclusively last week, Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Asset Control sent Piker an administrative subpoena seeking financial, logistical, and communications records relating to his March trip to Cuba as part of an investigation into whether he violated U.S. sanctions laws against doing business with the communist regime running the island nation. Then last night, during protest outside an immigration and customs enforcement facility in Newark, New Jersey, hecklers confronted Piker, calling him a effing fraud, fake grifter and dog abuser. Told him to go back to the desktop. He denied allegations he trained his dog Kaya with a shock collar. Well, told his lawyer following on the gaming platform Twitch that the British authorities denied his electronic travel authorization, preventing him from traveling to the UK for a series of scheduled appearances, including events at Southwest London and the Oxford Union. Approved U.S. travelers to the UK can enter that country with a simple electronic travel authorization, which is easier to get than a formal visa. He said, I've been banned from the UK. I've been to the UK on numerous occasions, and all the things they're complaining about now are things I've said before. He said it was ridiculous. Well, some folks just don't know when to shut up. Well, Hezbollah's game-changing night-hunting weapon punches through Israel's defenses, according to an expert. Hezbollah's begun unleashing game-changing waves of lethal nighttime drones against Israel. That's according to a defense expert. The attacks have been contributing to casualties, defense breaches, and plunging parts of the border region into chaos, according to reports. Escalating deployments by Hezbollah have also prompted Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to convene an emergency security meeting on May 30th after a surprise Hezbollah strike amid reports of utter chaos as Israeli forces scramble to respond. These nighttime drones are the very small Category 1 and Category 2 drones, according to defense expert and Dragonfly CEO Cameron Shell. They're generally used by squads on the ground to go and conduct tactical lethal missions or surveillance missions right in the theater immediately. What they do is use thermal sensors to be able to fly at night and use heat signatures to spot IDF troops. Well, it looks like that war is going to continue. Well, Cory Booker admits Graham Plattner has questions to answer after the latest scandal came to light. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, admitted to having concerns on Sunday over the latest scandal surrounding Graham Plattner, the presumptive main Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate. On appearing on ABC's This Week, Booker was asked about the latest scandal plaguing Plattner's campaign after it reported Plattner sent explicit messages to at least 6 women despite being married. The host, Jonathan Karl, asked Booker, do you have concerns with the weight of all these controversies that it may jeopardize Democratic hopes to get that Senate seat in Maine? And Booker said, yes, I do have concerns. The guy has questions to answer. That's what campaigns are for. Then he pivoted to discussing his concerns over the Democratic Party failing to take back the Senate in 2026. He said, I know that so much is riding on Democrats taking control of the Senate. That's this election. If we don't get the votes necessary to take care of the House and the Senate, we'll continue to have an out-of-control president. Well, everything comes back to being President Trump's fault. I can identify with that attitude. Well, next NFL star is knocked out in an MMA fight after coming into the bout with a weight advantage. Former NFL star Greg Hardy has faced his trials and tribulations in the cage as a figure in mixed martial arts, and he was on the receiving end of a knockout blow once again on Saturday. Hardy contended with Darko Strazik at Fight Nation Championship 31. It's supposed to be a heavyweight bout, but Hardy reportedly missed weight by 25 pounds. Had a 52-pound weight advantage over Stasic, though it didn't appear to matter very much. Stasic started the third round with a brutal left hook and knocked Hardy backward. Former Dallas Cowboy and Carolina Panther defensive end didn't see Stasic's windmill punch and sent him to the mat. And then Stasic delivered one giant hammer fist to Hardy's jaw, and the referee came in and stopped the bout. Well, Stasic was given the a knockout win. Now, Democratic lawmakers gripe about the economic violence of not being paid to stay home from work when menstruating. Democratic lawmakers complained in late May about employers not providing paid leave for painful menstruation cycles, called it economic violence. Forcing a worker to choose between paying her rent or losing a day's pay to recover from a grueling gynecological procedure is not a choice. It's economic violence, according to Representative Adelita Grajava, Democrat of Arizona. This was said during a press conference on May 21st. She was joined by Representative Yasmin Ansari, Democrat of Arizona, and Rashida Tlaib, Democrat of Michigan, who are backing Ansari's Reproductive Health Care Leave Act with part of her HER agenda. That's healthy, equity, and rights. Well, why don't we all just go home and sit? That'd make everybody happy. Pay folks for doing nothing. Well, a man walked in, wanted in a deputy ambush, caught after a wildlife camera sighting and a major manhunt. The armed and extremely dangerous man wanted in connection with the shooting death of a Virginia deputy was captured in North Carolina on Sunday. Carroll County Sheriff's Office said Michael Puckett was captured in Surrey County after an extensive manhunt. Earlier on Sunday, authorities said Puckett was spotted on a wildlife camera at 6:56 in the morning on Green Hill Road, north of Mount Airy. That agency shared an eerie photo of Puckett wearing a baseball cap and some sort of covering. Puckett supposedly ambushed two deputies during a welfare check on Friday night, killed a military veteran and injured a second officer. Carroll County Sheriff's Office Deputy Logan Utt, 31, was killed in the attack, according to Carroll County Sheriff Kevin Kemp. For Puckett's capture, the FBI announced a reward of up to $50,000 for information to locate and capture him. U.S. Marshal Service also offered a $10,000 reward, which of course brought the combined amount up to $60,000. And it's unclear if this reward aided in his capture. He's facing an aggravated murder charge in Virginia, according to police. The FBI's Richmond Field Office assisted the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, U.S. Marshals Service, Virginia State Police, and numerous local and state agencies in the manhunt. The encounter unfolded just before 9:30 in the evening local time when the two Carroll County deputies were dispatched to a home after a family member requested a welfare check. When the deputies met with Puckett, he allegedly opened fire, killing Utt and wounding the second officer, whose life was saved by his ballistic vest. Deputies returned fire, but Puckett fled the scene and remained at large. Joined the force in 2023 after serving the nation as a military veteran. According to what Kemp wrote in a statement, becoming a deputy sheriff was a lifelong dream, and he worked every day to make Carroll County a safer place. Well, I believe he left behind wife and children. Wounded deputies recovering in stable condition. Well, Kurt Russell proved Hollywood wrong by ditching L.A. decades before the celebrity exodus began. Wasn't looking for an escape, but found a home in the mountains after leaving Los Angeles. Russell, who's 75, admitted that his ranch life in Colorado allows him to do the things that I want to do on a day-to-day basis. What I want to look at, what I want to be part of, all the things that Colorado has to offer, he told People magazine. He said, I want to eventually get into the ranching life. He added that when Goldie and I got together a couple of years later, we both built a ranch here, there together, where our family has grown up. That was 40 years ago. Well, the Tombstone Star noted that his decision to leave Hollywood at the time wasn't a popular option within the entertainment industry. He said, I wasn't escaping. I was just living where I live. I was fortunate it really didn't make any difference. But when I did it, nobody else was doing it. I had a lot of folks tell me, well, that's goodbye, and that's it. And I said, well, we'll see. He witnessed the exodus out of the City of Angels in the years since he chose a more relaxed lifestyle in Colorado with his family. He said, I don't dislike L.A. It's just not my preference in terms of how I like to live my life. He said, you got to understand something about the area of old Snowmass. Everybody who lives there, they live there because they want to. Can't say that about L.A. He said life in Colorado for his children is very difficult, very different from being in the city. Well, Karen Bass appears to liken Spencer Pratt to Trump amid tightening L.A. mayoral race. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass and her colleagues spent a final weekend before Election Day crisscrossing the city as a surprising competitive mayoral race heads toward a likely runoff. Bass is seeking a second term up against former reality star Spencer Pratt and the city council member Nithya Raman in Tuesday's primary election. Recent polling has shown a competitive race as no candidate is expected to get more than 50% of the vote. Top two finishers will then advance to a November runoff. On Saturday, Bass, who's backed by high-profile Democrats, including former Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin "I'm Just Wonderful" Newsom, stopped at the Yosemite Recreation Center in Eagle Rock. She was seen serving tacos, wearing an apron, bearing the slogan "Common Sense" and "Carne Asada." And during an Instagram live stream on Saturday, she took aim at Pratt. She said, "You got a failed reality TV star who wants to be famous." She is a mayor who allowed her city to almost burn down. So they have a lot in common. Well, sailboat tracking shut off could be crucial in that hooker disappearance, according to experts. Former federal prosecutor wrote a book on no-body murder cases, told Fox News that a key question in the search for a missing American woman is why her husband's sailboat stopped transmitting location data on the night she died. Brian Hooker and Lynette Hooker left the shore at Hopetown in the Bahamas at about 7:30 that evening on April 4th. Brian Hooker told authorities that rough water caused his wife to fall off their dinghy. He paddled to shore and arrived at Marsh Harbor about 4 in the morning on April 5th, according to authorities. Couples headed back to their sailboat called Soulmate, their full-time home and retirement. That's when Lynette fell overboard, according to Brian. The couple frequently sailed around the U.S. and Caribbean, according to their social media pages. Data was obtained by Fox News through a marine tracking company, Vessel Finder, showed the Soulmate's automatic identification system, which broadcast the vessel's identity, speed, and position, went dark at 9:29 p.m. on April 4th. Then resumed till 8:40 a.m. the next morning, a blackout of more than 11 hours. Blaine Stevenson, a friend of Brian Hooker's, previously told Fox News that Brian returned to the sailboat with the search and rescue officials on the morning of April 5th. Coast Guard Investigative Service is conducting a criminal investigation into her disappearance. Tad DiBiase, a former federal prosecutor and author of the book No Body Homicide Cases, a practical guide to investigating, prosecuting, and winning cases when the victim is missing, told Fox News that finding out how the tracking data went dark would be a key question for investigators. It shouldn't have gone dark, practically speaking. One southern city never heard of is growing faster than any place else in America. A few years ago, the city of Salina, Texas, was a quiet ranching town surrounded by open fields an hour north of Dallas. Now it's the fastest growing city in America, where bulldozers outnumber cattle and sprawling new neighborhoods are rising almost overnight. The boom transforming this once rural community reflects the explosive growth reshaping North Texas as families and businesses push beyond city hubs and such a more affordable housing, better schools, and more space. But the rapid expansion is also testing Salina's infrastructure, water supply, and ability to preserve the small town identity that drew many residents there in the first place. If you drive around Salina, you can definitely tell they're the fastest growing city, according to Mayor Ryan Tubbs. Got a lot of road construction going on, a lot of new sewer and water lines, just all different infrastructure projects getting ready to service our residents of the future. According to new U.S. Census Bureau estimates, Salina grew by 24.6% between 2024 and 2025, meaning roughly 1 in 4 people in the city today didn't live there a year ago. And despite this, residents say Salina has managed to hold on to the close-knit community feel that prompted a lot of families to put down roots there. According to resident Carolyn Harvey, we can see and feel the growth, but we haven't lost our sense of community here in Salina. City's rapid expansion mirrors the broader population boom unfolding across North Texas, where communities on the outer edge of the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex are growing at some of the fastest rates compared to other cities in the country. Well, here we've got a number of massive Amazon facilities going up, which of course is going to have a major impact on the infrastructure here. Well, Carmelo Anthony, his self-defense claim could define murder trial in a high school track meet stabbing. One year after 17-year-old Austin Metcalf was fatally stabbed during a confrontation at a Frisco high school track meet, the Texas suspect accused of killing him is expected back in court as jury selection begins for his murder trial on Monday. Carmelo Anthony, 18, faces a first-degree murder charge in connection with Metcalf's death. Start of jury selection is expected to provide the latest indication of how prosecutors and defense attorneys plan to navigate a case that's drawn widespread attention and competing claims about whether Anthony acted in self-defense. As he prepares for his trial, Texas defense attorney and legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal told Fox News that one of the biggest hurdles facing both sides may be finding jurors that have already formed opinions about the case. Case in particular has a lot of disturbing history when it comes to misinformation online, rumors, doxing, and things like that. According to Rosenthal, publicity surrounding the case has become so intense that one of the judges previously involved in the case required FBI involvement after receiving threats. Well, we'll see what happens with that case. Well, finally, a New York City landlord is pleading for help as a 9-year squatter continues to drain him dry in a court saga. Brooklyn landlord says he's been trapped in a nearly decade-long legal nightmare. It's cost him hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid rent and legal fees. New York courts repeatedly delay resolution as the tenant continues living in the apartment without making direct rent payments to the landlord. Thomas Diane, who owns a small 8-unit building in Park Slope, told Fox News he spent the last 9 years trying to get a woman who originally moved into one of his apartments as a living companion for an elderly disabled tenant. He's trying to get her out of the apartment. Court records show the woman moved into the apartment in 2014 after responding to a Craigslist advertisement seeking a lived-in companion for the tenant who later died in 2016. What followed was nearly a decade of litigation spanning multiple courts and proceedings. After the elderly tenant's death, disputes arose over the woman's tenancy status, rent obligations, and whether the apartment remained subject to New York rent stabilization laws as Diana sought unpaid rent and possession of the apartment. Well, under Mondami, if you want to move in and take something, do it. We'll see how this comes out. Well, we've been talking about a lot of strange stories over the years. And got a complaint from a listener some time back. Why did most of my stories about UFOs and the bizarre center around the U.S.? Wasn't there strange things elsewhere in the world? And they're absolutely right. There are. The last couple of shows have been about UFOs over India. There have been stories coming out of India for well over 100 years. This story we're going to start out with is a Barabum UFO encounter. It took place in the evening on October 3rd, 1957. Barabum village was caught between the weight of harvest and the lightness of the celebration. The air in that then undivided Manbhum district of Bihar, now divided between Jharkhand and West Bengal, carried the scent of fresh grain mingled with the perfume of incense rising from temple courtyards. It was Durga Puja season, time of prayer and rhythm and ritual. The fields had been reaped, the granaries filled, and the hearts of the villagers were lighter than they'd been all year. The village was alive with sound and momentum. Women in starched saris arranged garlands along the temple walls. Men discussed the weather and the crops while sitting on charpoys, the wooden bedstead woven with jute rope under the shade of banyan trees. Children chased one another along dusty paths, some carrying drums and others scattering flower petals. Folk singer tuned his ektara, one-stringed instrument resembling a tiny violin, beneath the mango trees. He prepared verses of the goddess Durga's victory over Mahisasura. Temple bells had just finished their fifth ring when it all happened. It was 6:27 in the evening when everyone heard a low-pitched hum come from the sky. It wasn't thunder, it wasn't wind, it was nothing the villagers could explain. More vibration and sound, as though the air itself had grown thick like water before a monsoon. Few people looked up instinctively. The birds that had been chattering in the trees fell silent. A line of cows tethered near the grain sheds began to bellow and strain at their ropes. One broke free and ran toward the edge of the village, his bell clanging in rhythm with the rising hum. And then everyone saw it. Above the western fields, just beyond the horizon, a metallic disc floated into view. It moved with absolute silence, the hum replaced by an uncanny stillness. And it was enormous, larger than a bullock cart, maybe two, hovered with a grace that felt unearthly, casting a shadow even with the fading light. Its underside glowed faintly, shifting between copper and amber and bluish white. Didn't have any wings, no propellers, no flames. Didn't fall from the sky, it simply was there. Villager stopped mid-motion. A priest halted his mantra. Child froze mid-laugh. Even the flames in the temple lanterns flickered as it slowed. Time itself seemed to stand still. Farmers dropped their tools in the fields. Teachers abandoned their lesson charts. Every eye turned skyward. And for a moment, the entire village stood still. Hundreds of people witnessing something that had no name in their world. Some murmured prayers, others clutched holy symbols or touched the earth in reflex. Few wept, overwhelmed not just with fear but with awe. The object remained unmoving, as though studying them or deciding what it was going to do next. One elder whispered, "It's not ours." Others said, "This is not from gods we know." The disc pulsed faintly, its edges blurring with the heat rising from clay. Rotated slowly on its axis, reorienting itself to invisible coordinates. And then began to descend, slowly and deliberately, toward the mango grove at the southern edge of the village. And this was just the beginning of the visitation. As the villagers of Barabam stood transfixed in the dimming light, the disc-shaped object moved forward at the pace of a drifting cloud before stopping again just above the mango groves. Unlike any aircraft known to the villagers of the wider world in 1957, this object was perfectly round, had a dome top and a glowing base. It pulsed gently in hues of gold and violet. Didn't make any sound, not even the faint hum associated with electrical engines. But despite its silence, there was a presence about it, a density in the air as if the atmosphere itself had thickened around the craft. Eyewitnesses later described it with both awe and precision. They said it was as wide as 3 bullock carts placed end to end. Its surface appeared metallic, like beaten silver soaked in sunlight. Lights rotated slowly around its midsection as if scanning the ground below. It cast a sharp shadow even in the waning light. Shadow didn't always align with the direction of sunset. This made a slow circuit around the temple hill before returning to hover above the grove. Though it was completed an aerial survey denoting the village boundaries, the temples, the farmlands. And then it began to rotate again on its axis. Not a frantic spin, but the lazy momentum of a potter's wheel. The lights along its base blinked in a pattern. 3 short flashes, a pause, and 1 long flash kept repeating. Nobody knew what that pattern meant, but everybody watching felt it was deliberate. At one point, a flock of birds arose in alarm. As they approached the saucer, they veered sharply as though encountering an invisible barrier. Some dropped gleefully out of the sky, their wings stiff before regaining flight and disappearing into the forest. The neighboring village of Jalda, perched on a slight ridge, school children and her teacher watched the event unfold. Though too distant to see any details, they described a disk of light with what looked like teeth of flame circling underneath. At that point in time, more than 800 villagers drawn from 3 settlements had gathered across the open spaces near the temple, the grove, and the fields. And each one reportedly saw the same thing. The object was unmistakably real, and it wasn't leaving. And without warning, it shifted, not gradually, but suddenly, as though time had skipped. Moved a few meters to the east and stopped. This happened 3 times in quick succession, each movement accompanied by a brief dimming of its lights. The motion was the kind no human aircraft could achieve, instantaneous and linear, not the drag or turbulence that aerodynamics would predict. By the time the saucer settled into a steady hover above the mango grove, hundreds of villagers were watching, not only from Barabum, but also from the neighboring settlement of Jalda and Patamda. The terrain of the area, with its rolling hills and terraced fields and open village paths, allowed for clear lines of sight. Some places, children climbed trees for a better view. In others, families stood on rooftops holding hands. The witnesses represented a cross-section of rural life. Among them was Raghunandan Prasad, the village school teacher, educated in Patna, known for his mythological nature and journal keeping. Kanti Devi, a folk singer performer of oral epics, whose observations later influenced local ballads. And Hiraram Mato, the village blacksmith, a practical man who'd never believed in ghosts or miracles. Dozens of students were also present, barefoot and wide-eyed, clutching their slates. Each person, regardless of background, caste, or age, saw the same thing, and each would later describe it with remarkable consistency. In the days and the weeks that followed, a small team of anthropologists and journalists visited the region, drawn by whispers of the mass sighting. What they found wasn't hysteria, wasn't superstition, but a calm, cohesive series of testimonies. The witnesses consistently reported that the object was disc-shaped. It emitted light but not heat, made no sound except the earlier low-frequency hum. It hovered in the sky without swaying, and it moved with a sharp, instantaneous shift. The descriptions were so consistent that one researcher from Calcutta remarked as if they all memorized the same dream. But this wasn't a dream. What made the account so striking was not their clarity alone, but their lack of embellishment. Nobody claimed it emitted beams. Nobody said they saw beings emerge with no tales of gods or monsters. Only what everyone had reported seeing. As the saucer maintained its position above the mangrove grove, a cascade of sparkling material began to fall from its underbelly. It wasn't a torrent, and it wasn't violent. These particles descended gently, almost weightlessly, twirling as they caught the last rays of the sun. From the ground, it looked like a soft, glittering snowfall against the backdrop of twilight. Villagers gasped. Children reached out with upturned palms. Some ran beneath the cascade, laughing nervously, trying to catch the falling dust. Others pulled them back, fearing it might be harmful. A few elders urged everybody to step away and recite protective mantras. Particles settled across the field in a radius of roughly 50 feet. They clung to leaves and rooftops and animals and skin. Those who touched the material described it as cool and dry, like powdered metal. It shimmered faintly, even in the shadows. Kanti Devi, the folk singer, later described it as like stardust, but heavier. You could feel it without weight. It stuck to my fingers like saffron, but it didn't stain. Well, within the hour, unusual effects began to emerge. Children who had played in the dust complained of tingling sensations on their hands and faces. One boy developed small red rashes that spread across his forearm. One elderly man who stood closest to the fall reported blurred vision and nausea by midnight. 3 cows, which had grazed near the grove earlier that day, collapsed by dawn. Their bodies showed no external injuries, but their eyes were glazed and their skin had developed a pale, translucent sheen. Local farmers noted over the next few days the rice stalks within the affected radius began to wilt and curl as if struck by an invisible frost. The soil hardened, earthworms vanished, even weeds refused to grow. Well, panic crept through the village like a second twilight. Was this stuff poison? A sign? A test? Some believed the dust was a gift from the gods and began collecting it in jars and small cloth pouches. Others thought it was a curse and tried to bury or burn any materials they had touched. Rituals were performed, coconuts were broken, soot was applied to the foreheads of children. The teacher, Margunandan Prasad, who had collected a small sample using a brass plate, took it home for observation. He found when it was kept in darkness, the particles continued to emit a faint glow for several hours. When exposed to sunlight, they dimmed, then reignited when returned to the dark. He made detailed notes and later tried to submit those to a local academic journal in Calcutta. The notes were returned unread, accompanied by polite refusals that said, "We don't publish speculative phenomena." By the end of the week, the dust had vanished. Some said it dissolved. Others claimed it had been swept away by wind or rain. A few insisted it had been reabsorbed by the earth. But the effects remained. The field where it had fallen became the subject of local taboo. Farmers refused to plant there. Children were forbidden from entering. The animals avoided it instinctively. After the glowing disk departed and the shimmering dust settled, the village seemed to fracture into two different parts. Between those who believed the event was a blessing and those who feared it was a curse. Between awe and anxiety. Between reverence and panic. Some villagers called it a divine visitation. They cited ancient verses, local lore, and oral histories of sky chariots and heavenly beings. One elder claimed it was the return of a lost Vimana from the Mahabharata. Another woman, a grandmother who kept a shrine to both Hindu gods and tribal spirits, called it a silent messenger from beyond the clouds. Began to light incense at the grove's edges, offering rice and marigolds and whispered prayers. A few sang bhajans, holy Hindu songs at dusk, adapting traditional lyrics to reference the silver visitor light that listened. But for many, the incident had darker implications. Fear swept through homes like wildfire. Parents scolded children who had played in the glowing dust. Young women were forbidden to go near the mango grove. One man built a fence around his home and painted white circles on his door to ward off further skyborne spirits. Livestock was relocated. Some families packed their belongings and left for neighboring towns, hoping distance would protect them. Duality of response was deeply rooted in the cultural fabric. In a region where gods can bless and punish in the same breath, what came from the sky defied easy classification. Even the village priest seemed conflicted. One day he declared it a holy visitation, and next he described it as a test of faith. He performed both a welcome ritual and a protective exorcism within the same week. By the end of the month, the village agreed on one thing: that grove was no longer ordinary. On October 7th, just 4 days after the sighting, a group of 3 villagers led by the school teacher made the journey to Perula, the district headquarters. They traveled by bullock cart and on foot, covering nearly 20 miles to submit a written statement detailing the events. Their letter was signed by over 24 individuals and included descriptions of the object, the timing and duration of the sighting, the physical effects of the fallout, and the medical symptoms experienced by children and animals. They also carried a sealed brass container that held a sample of that strange dust collected from the grove. The teacher handed it over personally to a clerk at the subdivision office. He was assured the complaint would be reviewed. It never was. 3 weeks later, a typed response was sent to the village. It said investigation wasn't warranted, no aerial activity recorded, potential misinterpretation of atmospheric conditions. No officials visited. No scientists were dispatched. No analysis was returned. But the villagers knew what they'd seen. Frustrated, the teacher reached out to a local correspondent for a Calcutta-based newspaper. Article was drafted, but it was never published. Rumors circulated that a government representative had contacted the editor and discouraged its release. The message was very clear to everybody involved: stop talking about it. Still, the villagers recorded what they could in ledgers and school assignments and temple inscriptions. They refused to let the memory be buried with bureaucracy. Though official agencies never conducted formal studies, the mystery of the shimmering dust didn't fade entirely. Early 1950s, nearly 40 years later, researchers from a private geoscience institute in Calcutta visited the the village as part of a project cataloging rural legends with physical markers. They had heard whispers about the skyfall dust and wanted to investigate. To their surprise, a few families had actually preserved samples. Tiny cloth pouches sealed in brass containers, tucked inside prayer alcoves and beneath floor tiles. One family kept theirs wrapped in turmeric-stained muslin, believing it held medicinal power. Another kept it as a relic, claiming the dust glowed faintly in the rain. Well, laboratory analysis was interesting. Microparticles with fractured crystalline structure, not native to the soil composition in the area. Elevated traces of magnesium, silicate, and yttrium, both rare in local geology. Absence of organic material despite decades of storage. And what was most puzzling was the dust reactivity to low-frequency electromagnetic fields. When exposed to simple current, the particles aligned in uniform patterns, almost like ferrofluids, but dry. The research team published a brief note in an internal newsletter, never peer-reviewed, mind you, due to its unverifiable sourcing. But the villagers didn't need lab reports to validate what they knew. The land had changed. The trees still leaned away from the grove. The cows never grazed there again, and every year on October 3rd, somebody would return to the edge of the field, put a lamp in the soil, and whisper to the darkening sky, "We remember." The incident became part of the village's collective consciousness, woven into the same mental tapestry as harvest legends and ancestral epics. But unlike most village tales, it wasn't dismissed as myth, passed down with weight as something real, something seen. Children born in the 60s and 70s were raised with cautionary tales of the night the light fell, forbidden to play near the grove after sundown. Some were told the grove was a place where the gods had listened. Others were taught to walk around the grove rather than through it as a gesture of respect. And the school teacher's account, preserved in handwritten notes, became something of a local scripture. Older students were shown his diagrams. The page that recorded the cross-pulsing light sequence was passed around like a relic. It said that memorizing could protect you from getting lost. In wedding songs, the event was hinted at in metaphor. As the bride descends, may she sound like the sky once did. During local festivals, certain dance sequences now ended with hand raised to the heavens, a gesture not found in traditional choreography, but now accepted as custom. One of the most lasting expressions of this memory took place on the anniversary of the event. Every year on October 3rd, villagers would gather near the edge of the grove at twilight. They brought small clay lamps, lit not in mourning but in acknowledgement. The ritual wasn't scripted, not even formally organized. It simply happened. Families would place their lamps on the earth, sit for a moment in silence, and then go back home. Some villagers claimed they felt a hum in the soil during the vigil. Others said that the sky seemed clearer that night, as if watching. Well, in the early 2000s, a local non-governmental organization, or an NGO as it's called, attempted to introduce solar lighting to the grove as part of a rural development scheme. The villagers declined. One elder stated some places should remain in shadow. That's how the memory breathes. No, the outside world forgot Barabam. The village never forgot what it saw. Never forgot what it became that night. And the grove remained undisturbed. No crops were grown there. Children learned early not to chase kites into its radius. Dogs refused to go into it. The grass, where it grew differently, sparser, darker, and more brittle. And the story lived on, not in textbooks, not in museum archives, but in lullabies, in kitchen conversations, and the pause that came before somebody would ask, "Do you remember that night?" Though the villagers had no way of knowing it at the time, their encounter on October 3rd, 1957 was part of a global surge in unexplained aerial activity that stretched across continents. The patterns weren't merely visual, they were behavioral, symbolic, and in some cases, eerily synchronistic. In the same year, in Levelland, Texas, motorists reported their vehicles stalling as glowing objects hovered above the road. Witnesses described domed discs emitting pulses of light that disrupted electronics. In Florence, Italy, a crowd at a football stadium watched in stunned silence as multiple white orbs hovered overhead. Strange web-like material, later called angel hair, drifted to the ground before dissolving. In Russia, several military radar installations recorded unknown objects that moved at impossible speeds before vanishing from the screens. In Barabbam, an unassuming village in eastern India, 800 people saw a disc descend, hover, drop unknown material, and leave behind environmental and biological effects. Similarities were striking. The silence of the craft, its motionless hover followed by impossible maneuvers, a non-threatening observational presence, physical residue that defied explanation. Witnesses from varied social and educational backgrounds offered consistent testimony. Yet Barabbam remained isolated from the global narrative. India at that time had no ufology infrastructure, no declassification channels, no investigative bodies. And more significantly, its story came from villagers, not Air Force pilots or radar technicians. In a world still deeply shaped by colonial thinking, their observations were dismissed not because they lacked substance, but because they lacked status. And this omission, of course, mattered, because what Barabbam saw echoed what the world was seeing, with one critical difference. It involved direct environmental interaction. The falling dust, the damaged crops, the affected animals. These weren't hallucinations or abstract visions. They were measurable, physical, and left lasting changes to the local ecosystem. In modern UA research, such trace cases are considered high-value evidence. They offer material to test, environmental data to compare, and social and cultural patterns to examine. Had Barabbam occurred in a NATO country, it might have been studied alongside Roswell or Rendlesham. Instead, it remained a regional curiosity, a story passed down generation to generation, never up. But the pattern was there. In 1947, we had Nayagar, Odisha. A disc descends during India's independence. In 1951 in New Delhi, multiple pilots observed a cigar-shaped craft. 1957 in Barabbam, mass sighting, physical interaction, and fallout. 2001 in Kerala, red rain containing unknown biological cells. 2004 to 2007 in Ladakh, ITBP and scientists observed yellow spears and humanoids. And in 2023 in Imphal, Rafale jets scrambled in response to a hovering orb. In actuality, India is not a footnote in the global UAP phenomena. It's a key chapter. Barabbam, in many ways, well, it's the heart of that chapter. An event so pure in its form, so unpolluted by media or politics, may be one of the most authentic mass encounters ever recorded. What happened in Barabbam on October 3rd, 1957, defies every conventional framework for understanding. It wasn't a myth. It wasn't a legend. It wasn't an hallucination. It was a solid event. It was seen, felt, and remembered by hundreds. It left physical traces that altered local environment and triggered emotional and cultural transformation. And most importantly, it demanded answers from a world that's not yet ready to ask the right questions. There's no panic in the skies that night, only silence, observation, presence. The disc didn't attack. It didn't abduct. It didn't announce itself. It just came, it hovered, it released something unknown, and it left. The government ignored it. The media passed on it. Academia looked away, and the people of Barabbam did not. They remembered. They ritualized. They preserved. And in doing that, they became something rare in the history of unexplained aerial phenomena. A village of witnesses who never turned their back on what they saw. At a time when most such events are diluted by rumor and corrupted by hoax or lost in institutional neglect, Barabbam stands as an outlier, a place where the line between reality and wonder held firm, where memory didn't yield to suppression. And maybe the greatest mystery is not what the disc was or why it came, but why it chose there. A quiet village, a festival night, a moment of openness. Maybe the skies watch for modern technology. Maybe they respond to places where people still capable of witnessing without agenda. In the decades that have passed since that time, the world has seen radar blips and fighter jets scrambled and grainy videos debated endlessly on news channels. But in Barabum, they saw something else, something pure, something undeniable. Not a sighting, a visitation. And though it was never investigated, never recorded in official annals, and never analyzed in a laboratory, it still lives on. In songs, in the soil, and in silence. Because some truths do not need validation to be real. You don't need any people brave enough to remember them. Well, from Barabum, let's go to Kerala. The Red Rain mystery of 2001. You know, in Kerala, rain is not just a weather event. It's a ritual, a rhythm, a presence, I guess you could say. It seeps into poems and prayers and the architecture of every home. It heralds planting season and narrates childhood memories. Falls without fanfare, welcomed by the tappings of coconut leaves and the gurgling of overflowing canals. In this land of backwaters and banyans, rain is as expected as dawn. But on the morning of July 25th, 2001, that expectation shattered. At 8:45 in the morning in the usually quiet town of Changasari, nestled within the Kottayam district, the sky split open as they'd countless times before. What came down wasn't the familiar purity of monsoon rain. Oh no, it was red rain. Crimson droplets fell against rooftops. They flashed on the banana leaves. They streaked down windows, staining the panes with watered-down blood. Saris were blotched with dark rust-colored splotches. School children stared as their outstretched hands in disbelief. The water stained their palms, their uniforms, their notebooks. And the very first drop, something was wrong. The rain wasn't diluted with clay or soot. It didn't smell of earth. It smelled faintly metallic, according to some. Others said it had no scent at all, just a disturbing thickness. That consistency was similar to normal rainwater, but the visual impression was unforgettable. Well, of course, people screamed. Some ran inside and refused to step out for the rest of the day. Farmers covered their newly seeded rice fields with tarps. Children rushed home from schools. Mothers boiled water twice. Temple bells rang earlier than usual. In some homes, elders whispered it was a bad omen. The rainfall lasted just under 15 minutes. Panic it triggered would ripple across the state for months to come. In total, over the next 2 months, more than 100 cases of red rainfall would be reported across the central belt of Kerala. Kottayam. Some showers were faintly pink, others deep red, verging on black. Few reports even mentioned green and yellow tinges. But it began in Changasari. In the hours that followed the first fall, streets were lined with stunned residents holding out steel plates, umbrellas, and buckets to catch this mysterious fluid. Local shopkeepers closed up early. Clergy from all faiths offered conflicting interpretations. Some called it divine wrath. Others said it was a sign of purification. In a district hospital, a small crowd gathered to inquire whether there was a health advisory. There wasn't at that time. Nobody knew what to say. Never ever seen anything like it. By afternoon, the red rain had dried up, leaving behind dark splotches on walls and sidewalks. But a question had already embedded itself into the consciousness of Kerala. What exactly had just fallen from the sky? The red rain, strange and unsettling as it was, didn't just stain fabric and rooftops. It stained the psyche of the people who witnessed it. In the hours after the initial downpour in Changasari, rumors blossomed faster than explanations. Word traveled quickly from village to village, riding on the backs of buses and telephone calls and whispered market gossip. Within a day, what had begun as a local curiosity had transformed into a statewide mystery. Some believed it was a divine sign. Priests in small temples linked it to scriptural warnings of Kali Yuga's climactic turns. Mosque imams, approached by frightened devotees, reminded the faithful that rain was both a test and a mercy. Christian pastors urged calm but encouraged confession. In a land where spirituality infused every element of life, the appearance of crimson rain was quickly interpreted through theological lenses. Others, of course, turned to superstition. Elders told stories of curses cast long ago by wrong spirits. Few villagers remembered a local legend about blood from the sky that had once fallen during a famine, signaling the arrival of a new force. Some even linked the red stain to unfulfilled prophecies or planetary alignments. Local astrologers suddenly found their services in high demand, casting urgent horoscopes and scanning planetary charts for explanations. But for a new generation, more literate, more scientific, these interpretations weren't enough. Young students and teachers demanded data. School science clubs began collecting samples in glass jars and old Pepsi bottles. WhatsApp groups and early blogs buzzed with blurry photos and amateur chemical tests. Still, no consensus emerged. Speculation turned darker. Was this a fallout from a military experiment, a chemical spill, atmospheric weapon? Some believe it was connected to a mysterious sonic boom heard days earlier in nearby districts. A loud, brief thunder that shook windows but left no trace. Even talking of a meteor. July 20th, 5 days before the red rain began, several residents in southern Kerala reported a bright fireball streaking across the night sky. It exploded in a flash of greenish-white light and vanished without impact. No debris was ever recovered. Timing, however, was uncanny. Could the red rain be fallout from something not of this earth? One curious observer, a retired science teacher named Thomas Varghese, told a local journalist, if it's natural, it's a miracle. If it's unnatural, it's somebody's hiding the truth. Either way, we're owed an answer. Within the first week, the red rain had become a symbol, a mirror into people's fears and beliefs and imaginations. Dr. Godfrey Lewis, a respected physicist and then dean at the School of Pure and Applied Physics in Mahatma Gandhi University in Kalayam, didn't witness the first rainfall, but he did read about it. He saw mounting reports, the grainy news footage, and the whispers circulating through scientific and religious circles alike. Where others dismissed or speculated, he became curious and began collecting samples. Glass vials from rooftops, jars from frightened villagers, buckets passed down by school children. Every drop of red fluid became a data point. And then he discovered something interesting. What would ignite one of the most controversial scientific inquiries in India's modern history. Under the microscope, the rainwater was not red because of chemical dust or algae. It was filled with microscopic cells, thousands of them, red, oval-shaped, and suspended in the water like a swarm of seeds. It wasn't sand particles, it wasn't fungal spores, it wasn't ordinary pollen. These are biological, and yet unlike any known cells. The first shock came when Dr. Lewis stained the cells and examined them for nuclei. They didn't have any. No identifiable DNA, no organelles visible with traditional imaging. And the second shock came when he subjected them to extreme heat. Most living cells disintegrated under high temperatures, but these survived autoclaving at 121 degrees Celsius. Not only did they survive, they appeared to multiply afterwards. Well, to him, the implications were staggering. He repeated the test, he refined them, he shared the results with colleagues who expressed both awe and skepticism. When he presented preliminary findings to the university's internal committee, he was met with a mixture of admiration and caution. But the more he tested, the more the anomalies held. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about the tests that were done on the red rain. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show, saying have a truly great evening.